really tempted to make a joke about how it's 2021 and I'm making a video about a room of one's own from my kitchen, but to be fair, that's like for completely reasonable reasons. Hi everyone, Rosie here. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome to a not review of A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. I don't want to call this a review because can you review this? I'm sure you can, but you have to be a lot smarter than I am and put a lot more work into it than I'm putting into this video. So here's some reflections I had after reading this essay. The quick background: A Room of One's Own is an essay, a very long essay, it's like over 100 pages, that was based on two talks that Virginia Woolf gave to women's colleges, I think at Cambridge, in 1929, and then later she wrote up her notes / what she said and published it as an essay. And it's about women and literature and how throughout history we haven't seen that many great literary works, or that many literary works at all, from female authors, and her sort of thoughts on why that is. It is unlike any essay that I have ever read before, so especially since it's so short, if you're interested at all, I highly recommend just checking it out, giving it a read. It's a really interesting work, and I'm probably not going to do it justice, but here's some things that I got out of it, or some things that stuck out to me. Before I begin, I think I should give some personal context, because I really think that this is an essay that's going to have a very different impact and make you think about things in a very different way and make you feel very different things based on the background that you're coming from. I was fortunate enough to be born in a part of the world, and especially into a family, where sexism hasn't really been an issue in my life. And I know that I've been really lucky in that. I've been really lucky to have not only the parents, but the grandparents and the aunts and uncles that I have, where, you know, my brother and I were treated totally the same and there was no different expectations or anything like that. I've been really lucky in the teachers and the bosses that I've had, that they have all been incredibly supportive and kind and not shitty. But I also know that, as I said, I've been really lucky to have this experience, and that I know for both within Canada and especially internationally, this isn't the case for a lot of women. I say that because I don't read this essay and feel like it especially relates to my life. I know some people who I've talked to before I read it and in comments and stuff have said that it was a really transformative or like radicalizing work for them, whereas it was not like that for me. I didn't find anything in this that made me go, oh man, this is so applicable to me in my life, more that I can read this and acknowledge that it is applicable to many women, and that makes me angry, but not on my own behalf. This is probably TMI about me and my life, but I think it really affects how you're going to read this work and how you react. So I thought it was important to share that so you know where I'm coming from when I reflect on this. The first thing I want to mention is something that I brought up in my TBR for the month, where I discussed this, which, by the way, I'm reading this from March of the Moderns, which is organized by Margaret Pinard. Information about that down below. Anyways, I said in my TBR that I was concerned that there was going to be a lot of things in this essay that made me go something like, 92 years later? Yep. That's still an issue, that's still a thing, that's still relatable, and unfortunately there definitely are, but as I said, not so much for me personally, but for society at large. The core message of this book, as far as I understand it, and I by no means want to claim to properly understand this book or this essay, anyway, the core message is that without certain financial independence and freedom from domestic labor, how were women supposed to be writing great works of literature? Without a quiet place to get away from the constant demands of a household, how were they supposed to sit down and focus for long enough to actually produce something? And while I think in most of the world, women are, on the whole, far better off than they were in the 1920s, I think there's a lot of that still really rings true. And I had an idea a few days ago before I filmed this that I should do a whole thing and look at how this really ties into how the pandemic has affected women, not just as authors, but as people who work and who are members of society, and how, a lot of the childcare burden and a lot of the domestic labor still falls to women, even when they work outside of the home. but that is eerily like what I do at my job. So you can count yourself lucky that I only had a few days between when I finished reading the essay and when I'm filming this video, and that I didn't have time to do what, if I were doing it at work, would probably be like a 6-month research project. So instead, I just noted it down as an idea that would be interesting to look at work, and got on with these thoughts, which are not at all technical and don't involve me having to dig into data or make graphs. And also saves you from having to look at graphs, which I know that I like them because I'm an economist, but most of you probably aren't, so this is probably for the best, even if it's a rambling mess. Just remember what you could have had instead. One of the things in this book that I wasn't sure I was going to totally agree with or totally relate to was the whole premise that without your own space and, financial independence, basically, you can't produce great literature, because arguably a lot of the great literature that we have has been produced under not ideal circumstances. But thinking about it throughout the whole essay, I think what I'm taking from that far more is that it's much easier for genius to flourish under freedom and under more favorable circumstances. So I think how I'm thinking about it now is that, well, yes, many great works have come out of really dire circumstances, but at the same time, how many great works have we lost to those terrible circumstances? Because we only see the survivorship bias side of it, where we see the ones that come out, but we never see the ones that don't get made by male or female authors because of the circumstances of their lives. How many people expended all of their energy into survival and therefore never had the opportunity to create something wonderful? How many people weren't educated and therefore had great ideas but couldn't communicate them to us through time? How many people, especially women, were told throughout history, either explicitly or implicitly, that no one was interested in what they had to say, or that their ideas weren't worth recording, so they never wrote them down, or if they did, they hid them away and we never saw them? And so from that context, I think it really does make sense. And of course, this doesn't apply just to literature or works of fiction. This can apply to any sort of, I don't want to say more intellectual work, but work to create things that aren't strictly necessary for survival. How many paintings or inventions or innovations have we missed because people were in situations that they could not create them? Another aspect that gave me a lot of thought, and that I have absolutely no idea where I really stand on or how I really feel about it still, is the discussion of women writing as women naturally write versus women imitating men's writing. Because one of the topics that Woolf really brings up is that literature and the literary world needs to make space for women's writing and women's voices, and not just celebrate masculine writing and only elevate women who write like men write. And on one hand, yeah, that makes total sense. I don't think people of any gender should have to mold themselves into traditionally masculine styles of communicating or being a person or writing or whatever in order to be considered good. We need to find merit in what everyone has to offer in their own voice, not just when they're doing it in the way that, oh god, this is so hard to say. Do you guys get the idea? I hope you get the idea, because I can't figure out how to say this any better. It's that sort of thing, like, again, I don't know how to articulate it, but a lot of advice about getting ahead in the world is to fundamentally do things the way men do it. It's the classic thing of taking out all the I thinks and in my opinion and maybes in your emails so that they seem more direct and aggressive and like confident, which on one hand, being direct and confident can be a good thing, but why is not having some self-reflection or like that sort of thing? Why is doubting yourself a bad thing? Why do we have to jump straight to be confident like a man as opposed to questioning, is that the right way to go about things in the world? But on the other hand, because as I said, I'm not sure how I feel about this, what are masculine and feminine qualities or writing styles or anything? How do I know if, I don't write fiction, but suppose I did. How do I know if I'm writing in my authentic voice or a voice that has been influenced by everything the world has told me since before I can remember? What are any of our qualities or styles or anything except an accumulation of the world we live in? So this is where my confusion comes from. Is there a natural feminine style? Or is there just the feminine style that has emerged because of how women are socialized in our world. Not that that product of our world style is not worth having, but how do we decide? Like, I'm just confused, basically, and yeah, how do you know if someone's being authentic or if someone is trying to use a style that they think is going to make them more successful? I've been trying to articulate like a closing thought on this topic for probably several minutes now, and just sitting here and going, it's so confusing. Where does inspiration end and true voice begin? How do you know if your voice is your own? And these are a lot of things that I don't have an answer to. So if you've read this essay, or if you just have thoughts on this topic in general, again, I would love to hear them down below, because it's something where I see both sides of it and I don't know where the answer falls or where my opinion falls even. I mean, there probably isn't one answer. It's not that sort of problem, but I don't even know how I feel about it because there's so many things swirling around in my head, and as soon as I have one thing pinned down, everything else sort of starts to shift. Honestly, I feel like this is a book that I'm probably going to want to reread next year and the year after, and sort of read it 4 or 5 or 6 times and think about it every time, and maybe read some reviews or commentaries or something to try and have absorbed and processed enough to actually form an opinion on it. Right now, I have all of these things that have inspired in me that, like I said, are just like a huge jumble in my head, but I don't really know how to make sense of them, and I don't really know what I think. I'm definitely having thoughts, but I'm not at all sure what they are. Anyways, like I said, this is just a very rambly reflections on this work that was really interesting, but since I don't have any sort of concluding point for this video, I'm just gonna say, please, let's talk about it down below. I think I've said that like 6 times in this video already, but like, let's discuss, because I feel like this is a work that needs to be discussed. I don't know if anyone can come to a conclusion on it just sitting independently and thinking about it. And of course, as always, if you like this video, please hit the like button down below. If you'd like to see more of my videos, please hit subscribe, and thank you for watching.